Mercury retrograde. Is it the culprit behind your computer crash, your travel delays, or those ghosted conversations or texts? Or is it rather your opportunity to connect soulfully in an introspective process and to do some of your own deep healing? Well, the answer is it's probably all of the above. But there are a lot of misconceptions about Mercury retrograde. Some people have dread when they think of Mercury retrograde cycles or when they know that one is approaching, or they say, I'm not making any decisions, I'm not signing any contracts. So I wanted to clear up some misconceptions about Mercury retrograde. I want to give you the ins and outs of this astrological cycle, and I want to talk about what it means for you in your sign. So it would be helpful to know your rising sign for this conversation. If you don't know your rising sign, then apply that to your sun sign, and we can think about it in terms of solar houses. We're going to talk about it sign by sign, and it doesn't matter what sign transiting Mercury is in. Your natal Mercury is going to determine how you experience your Mercury retrograde cycles. And more specifically, your natal Mercury and the houses that Mercury governs in your chart. So those Gemini and Virgo houses, those are going to be the areas of your life where you feel Mercury retrograde the strongest. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Mercury retrograde. What is Mercury astrologically? Mercury is the planet that relates to the way that we communicate with one another. Mercury governs our intellect, our thinking processes, that internal dialogue. So the way that we process information. For example, some of you are very auditory. And so you might have this inner narrator that's always going and dialogue. Some of you might process information more visually, where you think in pictures or images. Some of you might process information more conceptually, where there's a sensation that's associated with your thinking process or the way that you interpret the sensations and the signals that are coming into your life. We all have different ways of experiencing our mind and experiencing our brain. We have different learning styles. We have different communication styles. Mercury relates to all of those things. Mercury retrograde in your natal chart means that during Mercury retrograde cycles, you feel right at home. It's like the whole world is speaking your language, is resonating at the level that you do. Mercury is also how we get from one place to another. It's transportation. Do we like to walk, bike? Do we have good coordination? Do we like flying? Do we want to go fast? Those are all traits that are attributable to Mercury's placement in our chart. Mercury is also our motor skills. It's our hands. Are we fidgety? You notice I talk with my hands a lot. I have a very strong Mercury. It's one of the strongest planets in my chart. It's in a nice dynamic relationship with my Jupiter. So I think big thoughts. I use big gestures. Mercury is also your hobbies. It's your interests. It's what do you love doing, even if you aren't getting paid for it. And because of those things, Mercury relates to our work, the careers we have, because it shows us where we're not going to be bored and what's going to keep our mind sharp. And often we choose careers that delight our Mercury, that are things that are interesting. What is a retrograde planet? Retrogradation is an optical illusion. It happens when a transiting planet is closer to the Earth than it is at other times in its orbital path. It's like when a car is right next to you at a red light and you're both going the same approximate speed, but it looks like it's going backwards. That's retrogradation. It's an optical illusion. And so the planets are going about the same approximate speed. Mercury is going slower in its retrograde cycle than it is at other times. And so it's going approximately the same speed as the Earth, close enough to look actually even bigger in the heavens. and it looks like it's going backwards. So it's not actually going backwards. It's just how it appears from our vantage point on Earth. All planets go retrograde. Any planet that we can see from our planet. Earth, we're on it, so we don't see it going retrograde. But to other planets, Earth goes retrograde. Mercury retrograde cycles are about 3 weeks each, and we have about 3 of them a year. And often Mercury retrograde cycles happen in the same element each year. So for example, we'll have 3 Mercury retrogrades with fire in fire signs, or water or air or earth, or they're moving back and forth between a fire and a water. And so we get a real sense of that element, and that element becomes a big player in the overall astrology of the year. Because Mercury is closer to the Earth during its retrogradation than it is at other times of the year, we feel the influence of that planetary rock stronger than we do at other times. We get to pay attention to the Mercury-related aspects of our lives and make some real practical changes. For this reason, any communication issues that we have in our relationships are going to rear their heads. Any travel delays are going to rear our heads. Times when we're not organized and we know we should be better organized, Mercury retrograde will bring those to our awareness and allow us to make some changes moving forward. Mercury retrograde also brings up opportunities for us to reconnect with our past. Any retrograde cycle gives us a redo. And so often we're facing the same types of circumstances that we have every Mercury cycle. And they often have to do with how we sacrifice ourselves for others, how we don't adequately express our needs or our wants or our preferences. And that's because, remember, Mercury is our internal dialogue. And if there is something that we're thinking about, like I regret that I didn't call that person back, or I wish I would have done this, Mercury retrograde is going to allow that thought to come full circle. So it's not hanging out in the subconscious. It's prominent, just like that planet is prominent for us. And so Mercury retrograde gives us the opportunity to see what's in the shadows and to bring it into the light. This ties in to the Mercury mythology. So Mercury was a mythological character who could go in and out of the underworld and remain unscathed. And what is the underworld in terms of our modern day awareness? The underworld is that deep psyche, that part of us that's hidden, that part of us that we might be afraid to explore or we don't always want to see. It's the subconscious self. It's also a spiritual influence that connects us to our mortality and to the karmic lessons that we came here to experience. And so when Mercury's retrograde, it gives us the shielding to go into those dark places within ourselves, within our culture, to pull into the light anything that needs to die or needs to be transmuted or reborn. And it gives us the chance to do a do-over, a rethinking of things. I want to give an example of how this plays out societally. Mercury retrograde cycles are oftentimes when policy decisions are being reimagined or reconsidered. They can also be times when legal cases that have been ongoing for a period of time, or where there are unknowns associated with those, where those can come back up and resurface, or times when you see news stories harking back to previous true crime stories or investigations that didn't have an outcome. And we really see this with the Jeffrey Epstein case, actually. I've gone back through the timeline of that case from the time he was first accused of inappropriate and abusive behavior back in 2005. And I've followed the timeline and major intervals during that case. Mercury was retrograde when justice was being served. So, for example, he was accused in 2005. He was brought into prison in 2006 during Mercury retrograde. In 2007, he was released. Mercury was direct. And there are on and on and on. 2019, when he was finally arrested, Mercury was retrograde. And so there are all of these connections just in that one case. You'll start noticing it more and more. And I'm always curious to see what comes out of the woodwork during those Mercury retrograde cycles. And then sometimes what can happen is things come out into the open, and then it's like, okay, let's tuck that back away. Let's not talk about that and put it under the rug. And then it comes back out in the next Mercury retrograde cycle. So this Mercury retrograde is happening in Donald Trump's 12th house of secrets and all the things that he wants to keep under cover. And here is where the sun is shining. Here is where Mercury retrograde is happening. And so all of this is being released. The Epstein trial, the Epstein files, Trump's involvement with Epstein. It'll be interesting to see what happens on August 9th. That is a full moon cycle with Mercury retrograde, the sun shining in Trump's 12th house, Mercury shining in Trump's 12th house. And I think that's going to be a pivotal moment for these files coming out into the light and for people to really see how insidious this whole ring was and the harm that they did. So stay tuned for that. I didn't want to make this a political conversation, but it's just interesting to note that this is an example of what happens during Mercury retrograde. The other thing that happens during Mercury retrograde is your exes come out of hiding. And you might have a reconnection, or you might think of someone who was in your past and say, oh, I wonder what they were doing. Let me reach out to them. And so we see a lot of people getting back together, people entering into the same dynamics that they did when they didn't work out the first time. And there's often a healing that occurs, even if you don't end up getting back together, or if you have realizations that this relationship is actually not something I want in my life. Even if that's the outcome, there is deep healing that occurs. Go cautiously. When Mercury is retrograde and you're reconnecting with an ex, don't jump back in, because there's a lot of unfinished business, and you're reconnecting really not just with a person from your past, but with your past self, with decisions that you made. And so Mercury retrograde cycles are deeply healing, deeply personal. Mercury retrograde is a time for reflection. It's an introspective time. And I find no matter what, at some point during that 3-week cycle, I find myself going through old photos and reminiscing, and maybe you do too, or decluttering. It's a great time for clearing back, because the further back we go and the deeper in we go, the further we shoot on the other side of that retrograde cycle. So use this as a time to take a sacred pause. I want to talk about your Mercury retrograde blueprint, because every one of us is going to have a different experience of Mercury retrograde based on the placement of Mercury in our charts, and also based on the houses that Mercury governs in our natal chart. Think about your rising sign for this, or your sun sign if you don't know your rising sign. If your rising sign is Aries, then Mercury is the governing planet for your 3rd house of communication and your 6th house. And what that means is that for you, Mercury retrograde cycles are very much about Mercury-related things: travel, transportation, communication, marketing. And so you're going to be thinking about what your message is, how you want to deliver your message to the world. You also might have issues with siblings or neighbors that come up every Mercury retrograde, or issues with your coworkers or your employees. Health issues could also be a consideration for you whenever Mercury is retrograde. And so you're fielding a lot of awareness about your own self-care and how you manage stress, and also how you communicate. If you're a Taurus, then Mercury governs your second house and your fifth house, which means that questions about values and priorities in budgeting and money could come up for you. You might use every Mercury retrograde to rethink where you're allocating resources, how you're building wealth, and you might even have financial hiccups that come up just to get you to rethink some of the decisions that you've made. So things about work and career could also fall into this as well. The other thing is that Mercury retrograde can be a very creative time for you. So take some time and some space to not have anything on your calendar and to give yourself time to paint, to write, to do something that nourishes that space of self-expression within you. This is a time when you're also maybe reflecting on your children and their needs versus your needs. Or if you don't have children, feeling that pull of the decision that you might be facing of, do I want children or not? Mercury retrograde also can bring up those kinds of realizations. And they can also inspire things like fertility treatments or moving forward with adoption. And so Mercury has that influence in your chart as well. But Mercury is playful for you. So don't forget to play, to have a good time. If you're a Gemini, then Mercury is your governing planet. And this means that every area of your life is going to have some kind of influence with Mercury retrograde. Your own sense of self could change. You might go back into the high school version of yourself and say, wow, I think I want to revisit that style. Or I'm thinking about getting a tattoo. Or you might have questions that are reflective about how you present yourself to the world. Also, communication is going to be a big focal point for you. Are you speaking your truth? Do you have something that you're hiding? Does someone in your life feel like they're hiding something? The other area of your chart that is lit up for you is the home, the family. And so looking at the division of chores, looking at your family of origin, you might have a call to step in to help one of your relatives, looking at your ancestral roots. These are all points of reflection for you. If you're a Cancer, Cancer rising, then Mercury retrograde is deeply personal and introspective for you. Mercury relates to your relationship with spirit and with the mystical sense of yourself. And so your Mercury retrograde experience is going to be a more inward, where you want to maybe do a tarot card spread or receive some spiritual guidance or healing, or connect with someone that you haven't connected with for a really long time for a healing process. Also, Mercury relates to your neighbors and the community connections that you have. It relates to your teachers, the way that you teach and communicate with others, and your siblings. And so some of the contentious parts of those relationships could be focal points for you, where you have to draw some boundaries, or you have to really look at your needs in those relationships. If you're a Leo or Leo rising, then Mercury retrograde can be one of those financial transits for you, where you're rethinking your finances, you're looking at your money, you're making some decisions about it, and you might even have extra expenses or some losses, or there might be more money, let's hope, coming in where you have to navigate, how am I going to dedicate this? What am I going to prioritize? And so questions about your own self-worth, your own value come into play, looking at how you can create more financial freedom. Also, this is a very social time for you, where you might have too many invitations or too much too fast, and you need to slow down. You don't have to say yes to everyone and everything. Take your time, be at peace, and know that you can change your mind if you've committed to something and you don't want to do it anymore. Don't feel like you have to exert too much energy when it comes to your social life. Virgo, Mercury is one of your governing planets, and that means that this cycle affects everything in your life, but particularly for you, it's going to bring up worry. And some of those stressors of, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? You might get into a paralysis by analysis mode with Mercury retrograde. And so slow down, keep it steady. You are going to want to clean everything, to organize everything, and just one step at a time. Mercury retrograde can be a very sacred experience for you. And so it's a time of rebalancing for yourself, prioritizing your well-being, going and seeing your favorite massage therapist or acupuncturist, really honoring your own needs. The other thing too is that Mercury retrograde cycles tend to bring up questions about your career. Are you aligned with your mission? Does your work or your public life feel soulful? And if not, then you might be aware of subtle changes that you could make. Also, opportunities can come into your life during Mercury retrograde, especially if you have a natal Mercury in Virgo. This is a strong Mercury. That means Mercury retrograde cycles can actually be pretty beneficial for you. If you're a Libra or Libra rising, then Mercury retrograde cycles are times when you're thinking about the big picture. You're dreaming. You're in touch with your spirituality. So it's a great time for a retreat. It's a great time to tap into your own inner guidance and intuition. It's also a time to voyage on a spiritual retreat, to get out of your space and give yourself some time away. You're going to need more introspection than others because so much of your life energy is about your relationships. It's about expression within the context of your interpersonal connections. And so for you, Mercury retrograde really is an opportunity to put up a boundary and say, you know what? I just need some time and some space to be with me. It can also be a time when you're reflecting on your beliefs and thinking about what's true for you. And so having maybe a reflection back on the beliefs that you were raised with and how they differ from where you are today. Those are all concepts that arise during Mercury retrograde, especially if you have your Mercury in Virgo. It can also be a time when you just want to get away and travel. And so that can be another influence of this cycle. If you're a Scorpio or Scorpio rising, this is a psychological influence for you. Mercury retrograde really does give you memories that arise from your childhood, and it helps you to look at your family of origin and your own experiences or traumas in a new light. So you get to excavate the cave of your own psyche and come out with some deep insights and healing and emerge really feeling like you are more in touch with your wisdom, with your power, with your voice than you were before. It's also a time of forgiveness for you, an awakening of issues related to trust. What I see often with Scorpios or Scorpio risings is that you might encounter something that feels off. Maybe someone who you don't perceive to be authentic, or you might feel like they're hiding something. And in facing those primordial triggers, you come to a realization that you're going to be okay and that you're going to be loved no matter what. And sometimes truth does come out that's not comfortable to see or to hear. And in that case, it liberates you to make choices that you weren't able to make before that truth emerged. This is also one of those times when you could reconnect with friends from your past or community groups from your past and revisit some of those relationships that helped build you up and create your sense of where you wanted to go for the future. So this can be one of those times for a reunion or a time to reconnect with good friends that you haven't seen in a while. If you're a Sagittarius or a Sagittarius rising, Mercury's going to be a little bit more challenging for you when it's retrograde. And that's because Mercury relates to points in your chart that are what we call angular points. So there are areas of your chart where there's a lot of energy. the 10th house, which is that house of your career, your mission, your ambition, and your 7th house, which is the house of your partnerships. And so during Mercury retrograde cycles, you could be aware, one, of your loneliness or the aspects of your partnership that aren't working, or the strong desire you have to be in partnership or be in relationship. It can be a time of coming together and rebuilding or rebonding your partnership. Then, in terms of career, this is often one of those times when you're reflecting on what you're called to do. And the influences of your family of origin come into play too. And you might be aware of patterns you have in your own professional life that you inherited from one of your parents, where you have beliefs about, I have to work hard to make a living, or self-doubts around your ability to achieve professional success. Those are questions that you are exploring during this cycle. And it can be a time when you're aware of changes you need to make. If you are a Capricorn, then this is one of those transits that relates to your health and your well-being. Mercury retrograde cycles are likely to inspire thoughts about your wellness routine, your health, how you're spending your time. And you could get into sticky situations where you don't feel free or you don't feel like you're aligned to how you want to be spending your days. Or you could be aware of the stressors in your life that are maxing you out. And so it's a good time to slow down. Just slow down in general. Make Mercury retrograde your time to clean out the closet, to empty your deleted emails and your spam folder and clean out and organize some of your computer files. Make it a time for daily habits and tasks that can help to give you more of a sense of grounding and stability on the other side of that retrograde cycle. It's also a time when you're challenging your beliefs and you're thinking more philosophically about, what do I want? What do I believe? How are my beliefs limiting my life experience? Those are all reflections for you during Mercury retrograde cycles too. And sometimes there can just be this feeling of restlessness, like, I got to do something different. But put a pause on it all. Use this as a cosmic break. If you are an Aquarius or an Aquarius rising, then Mercury relates to your playfulness, your ability to express yourself, your desire to have fun, your inner child. And so it's a time to nurture that part of you that probably gets put on the back burner quite often because you're so focused on using your life and your energy and your light to help others to make a difference in the world. And so this is a time to take a step back and honor your playfulness. Get those finger paints out. Go to the batting cages and hit some baseballs. Whatever allows that inner child part of you to liven and waken up, that's what is going to be so soulful and restorative for you during Mercury retrograde. This is also one of those times when a lover from your past could come into your life. And often it's not you want to be careful before fully going into a commitment, because it could just be something that you move through and you get to the other side of it and you realize, this is not what I thought it was going to be. So just tread carefully with any kind of romantic interest during Mercury retrograde. Finances are another area for you too, and it's more of the long-term finances, looking at your portfolio, rethinking some things, making some decisions anew. And so that's another way that this could play out for you. Pisces, Mercury governs 2 angular houses in your chart too. And so that means that Mercury retrograde cycles are going to feel like big realizations for you, big experiences. There's just a lot of growth and a lot of learning that happens for you during these cycles. And where you're experiencing this is in your roots, your family of origin, coming into contact with the ways that your family of origin influenced your adult life. looking at your home, real estate, making some changes there. You might feel inspired to change everything during Mercury retrograde or to do a major decluttering. And if so, this is a time to go slowly. Don't try to do it all at once. Also, your relationships can be areas where you feel some of that movement. It's not even tension. It's more of there's an evolution happening here. We're revisiting our communication, our dynamics, and we are determining how best to get along. Or if you're single, you're really reflecting on what you want in a relationship and starting the process of attracting that. Transiting Mercury is going to be moving through your chart and occupying a part of your chart during its 3-week cycle. That's where you're going to see events taking shape in your life. The outcomes that we integrate as we go through the retrograde cycle, those outcomes relate to the houses that Mercury governs in your chart. Where transiting Mercury is, that house in your chart shows where you might have a conflict or where you might lose something or have a technical glitch. It shows the area of your life where the activity happens. But those Mercury governed houses, Gemini and Virgo, that's where you actually have the shift in consciousness, the growth, the personal satisfaction that arises in the midst of those retrograde periods. So that is your Mercury retrograde overview. I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope it's helped to dispel some of the Mercury retrograde myths and to give you a new framework for understanding this important astrological cycle.